What is the connection between sexual intimacy and the workplace, or intimacy at the workplace? We all are forming relationships. What an amazing day. Christa Coetzee here. I am a relationship coach, sexologist, psychologist, and that's a mouthful. So, the first thing people often ask me is, Christa, what is a sexologist? Now, the interesting thing about sexology is that we are all sexual beings. And what I do with that is I actually help you to try and understand what is the combination between the brain and intimacy and the sexual organs that go with it. Now, there is no training in South Africa. So how did I stumble across this? A little bit more back about my background. Let me take you really far back. As I studied initially to be an educational psychologist. And as years went on, I started really understanding the child within the adult. And that's where we need to go. Us as adults have deep-rooted uncertainties. We have deep-rooted challenges, and we don't always know where they are. And people come to me and when they have intimacy concerns. And often we have to realize it's not the obvious where the deep challenges lie. It's what happened, the unresolved childhood belief systems, the unresolved childhood concerns, the way that we've learned how to be intimate or did not learn, or how we avoided intimacy. Now, intimacy is more than just sex. Intimacy is emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy, real connection with one another. And we need to realize that when there's some sexual challenges that we have, it's often coming from an understanding or a belief system that we bring with us and how we started interacting with one another. And that somehow worked for us up to a point until we needed to step into the close proximity with one another. Now, and that's where, when they come to me, as we need to know that we are relational beings. We are here to form connections. And there's one of the companies that actually used a slogan to say good sex starts with good morning. Now, good relationships start with good morning too. Now, there's a very strong connection when we talk about sexual intimacy, emotional intimacy, mental intimacy. We need to realize that when we step into relationships, we bring with us a load of our own belief systems that was formed from childhood, that was formed from what was modeled to us, that was formed from our interactions. And then if we have two people that come together, we have two sets of background concerns that come with us. Yes, we've got amazing experiences, but we also bring some trauma and some pain. Now, the biggest challenge is to find a way where both people can really meet one another and become a team. Now, what is the connection between sexual intimacy and the workplace, or intimacy and the workplace? And what it is, we are all stepping into a space where we need to find a way to accommodate one another. What I've really found in all the years of working as a relationship coach and a psychologist, sexologist, working in the field of human behavior, is that we often challenged to find a way to accommodate one another. So what we tend to do is we start facing one another like this, trying to convince one another. And the answer here is not about convincing the other person. It's not about who has got the strongest argument. It's about how do we find one another and connect with one another. How do we accommodate one another? We need to realize that when we want healthy relationships, we need to be able to have two people standing in their own power and accommodate one another. It's not about overpowering one another. And when we sit in a workspace, or we sit in a working as a team, or whether it is a family member, in all relationships, we need to realize they need to find a way to accommodate, to hear one another, to see one another. If we don't see one another, we're going to miss one another. And that's where our connections really go haywire. Now, the quality of our relationships is determined by the quality of the conversations that we have. Now, what does it mean? If I walk in and I come in and I want to try and overpower you, either by my words or my body language or my tone of voice, I am actually not meeting you in your power. I'm abusing and using my power to try and get a message across. That's where the convincing comes in. What we want is we want to be able to walk in, both standing in their power and convey a message. And when we start communicating, we need to realize is while I'm conveying my message, I need the other person to hear me. And when the other person is conveying a message, I need to be able to hear them too. And how do we do that? We step into the space. And often I work with the 5 pillars of communication. The first one is clarity over complexity. Now, what does that mean? I want to get my message across clearly and not complex. We often walk away from a conversation, and what we realize is, oh my word, I did not come across the way I wanted to. I don't think I was heard the way I wanted to, because I left the people guessing. So what do we need to do? We need to take the guessing game out of the way. If you want to convey a message, make sure that you are clear on what it is you want to say. I love the saying where we talk about is speak in a way you want the other person to hear you and that they would like to listen to you. And then listen to somebody in a way that they would like to communicate and talk to you. So clarity over complexity. We need to be specific. I need this because of that. Don't take the guessing game out of the way. The second one I want to talk about is curiosity before conclusion. So what does that mean? I want to open up the door for somebody to talk to me. I need to be more curious. Now, in the workplace, it's so important for us, as in all the other relationships, if I don't show any curiosity about what the other person has got to say, I'm actually building up a wall. And what's going to happen? We're going to close off. So curiosity, listen to what the other person wants to say to you. And then make sure that you really understood. And this is the third one we're going to get to, is when we're curious, we open the door. We don't jump to conclusions. And then the third one we say is listen to really hear them and not to win. To really understand them and not to win. Why is that important? If we have a team, we've got people that are pulling together. We're taking hands. If the one is pulling harder, what happens? It causes tension. The easiest way is to stand next to the person and walk alongside them, really hear them, really try to understand them so that you can actually together move forward. It's not a competition. The fourth one we're talking about is really making sure that there's congruence between your words and your energy. Now, what does that mean? Now, years ago, 1997, Albert Mirabai was a psychologist, a professor, and he wanted to understand what was going on in conversations between people. How did we convey messages? And the interesting fact that they found was that 7% of the conversation is words. The words we use, 7%. 38% is tone of voice. So, and then the other 55% was body language. Now, if we think about that, walking into a space before you've even said something, before you, in terms of your tone of voice, before you've even brought a word out, you are already communicating to the other person, whether it's that you're frowning, and I'm a very good example to use. And you will probably see, I use a lot of my hands. I use a lot of facial expressions. And then you start with that 55% of the conversation. And the moment that I step into that and I start, I've got a voice that can really carry. I don't really need microphones to get the message across. What needs to happen is I need to become aware of how my tone of voice really steps in. And then the third part, when I then open my mouth, often what I do find is that people are actually already having some kind of a feeling of what I'm bringing to the party. I need to be so mindful when I walk in that my body language is playing a huge part of the conversation. Be mindful of that. Then my tone of voice, and then the words. Now, if we talk about how many of you have found that in this day and age, we rely on WhatsApp to have conversations. And somewhere, somebody realized, as when we are using WhatsApps, the first thing that we do is we're using words. So we start typing. We're only using 7% of the conversation. So then they fortunately came up with emojis so that we can bring in the tone of voice, because it's some kind of a feeling of a warmth that I can put a heart, and immediately it's being interpreted in a different way. And then fortunately they started realizing it's okay, voice notes coming through. And then starting to have videos that we can take. And all of a sudden, when we use our cell phones, we actually start using all three major components, because the person can see your body language, they can hear your tone of voice, and they can get the words. And a lot less miscommunication happens. Now, if we talk about really wanting to make sure that the conversation is healthy, I need to be mindful to really have congruency between my words and the energy. And I would love to bring this in, because what happens is lately, as we move on in times, we are starting to use more and more with our loved ones, WhatsApps. We even start writing emails to loved ones that's not using WhatsApp. And then we're having, in a business situation, we write emails. So it's so important for us to make sure that we really, the tone that we bring in, the energy that we bring in, and the words, it's in congruency, because congruency builds trust. Now, the fifth pillar that we talk about, repair and reconnect. Now, we are not robots. We're going to get things wrong. People listen to you from their own filters. And we need to make sure when we step in, we try our best. But when we realize that there's somewhere the conversation did not come across the way it should come across, go back. And actually use the words as, can we try again? I think I did not come across the way I wanted to. Repair. That brings in a moment of, I see you, I value you enough, so that we can find a way to reconnect and then step forward. And reconnect and build together. So if a practical tip, as every day go through it and run through these 5 pillars. The first one, was my conversation clear? Clarity. over complexity. The second one we're talking about is making sure that I really listen to the person before I jumped to conclusion. In other words, curiosity before conclusion. Then I need to make sure that I listen to really understand, or did I listen to win? Did I already create an argument or a counter-argument while they were talking to defend ourselves? Making sure, was I congruent? What I said and my energy, was that incongruence? And if it wasn't, go back, repair it, and reconnect. And if we start becoming mindful of that, you will find that not only on your intimate relationships, what you will also find is that in all your relationships, right through to the workplace, from the bedroom to the boardroom, from an internal conversation with yourself to the external conversations, we are relational beings and we need to master the art of communication. And we have to realize that people all have needs, people have all emotions, people have all a voice. We need to find a way to create the balance, the playing field, the neutral ground where we can meet one another. And if we do that, we all win together. The quality of our conversations determine the quality of our relationships.